this is Virginia from Virginia's Craft Corner, and today, as part of Emmett O'Neill's summer reading program, we're going to be making watercolor leaf prints. Come craft with me! So for our watercolor leaf print, we're going to be using watercolor paper and using leaves and other things that we found outside to create a print of the leaves on the watercolor paper. Alright, let's go over our supplies. First, you're going to need a piece of watercolor paper. And I put my watercolor paper on something to keep the table from getting dirty. You could use a tablecloth, or I'm just using another piece of parchment paper. You'll need a piece of parchment paper that goes on top of your watercolor paper. You'll need a cup of water. You'll need watercolor paints and a foam brush and some paper towels. And it helps if you have a rolling pin. You don't have to have one. If you have a wooden dowel, you could use that, or you could even use a smooth-sided glass. You also need some leaves that you got from outside. These oak leaves work really well. The back of them feels slightly fuzzy, and they have a really big vein in them, so they make really good leaf prints. But any leaf will work. So the very first thing we're going to do is paint the background of our leaf print. So it works best if you pick a lighter color for the background and then you use a darker color for the leaves so that the leaf prints show up. So I think I'm going to use maybe a yellow. So you wet your paintbrush, your foam brush, and then you dip it in your paint, and then you just start painting the background. Now you're going to have to wait for it to dry, so the more water you use and the wetter it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. So try not to use too much. Now you need to set aside your background to dry. So lay out the leaves that you want to use, that you want to make a leaf print with. Let's clean the yellow out of our foam brush. And I squeeze it with my hand. And then I'm going to use my paper towel to dry it off so that it's not really wet. Now for this, you want your paintbrush to be mostly dry. You're trying to get a really dark, thick color, so you don't want a brush that's totally saturated with water. So I think I will do green leaves. So I'm going to just barely dip my brush in the water. And I'm going to get some green paint. And I'm going to paint the back of the leaves. Now you want to set the leaves out to dry. Let some of the water evaporate from them because you don't want them soaking wet. The more water you have, the runnier your print will be. If you let it dry for a little bit, you'll get a nice crisp print of the veins. So now that my background is completely dry, I'm going to place my leaves that are just barely wet onto my paper. Very carefully. Let's do like this. Now I'm going to place my parchment paper on top, and then I'm going to use my rolling pin to roll across and just apply even pressure. If you don't have a rolling pin, that's okay. You can just set a heavy book on top of it and leave it to dry for about 24 hours. Then you peel your leaves off, and you can just barely see the imprint of these leaves. So you want to do that as many times as you want to cover up your piece of paper, or however you want to do it, and you can experiment with more water, less water, and see what happens. So here's one that I did where I didn't wait for the background to dry completely, so you can kind of see the veins in some of the leaves, but it also spread the paint out more because the background was wet. Then I decided to do one on a white background, and you can see these really well. That's a sage leaf and an oak leaf. And then this is what happens if you don't wait for the water on your leaf to evaporate. The rolling pin will push the water out and make it spread out. So play around and see what you can get it to do. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another edition of Virginia's Craft Corner, and be sure and check out all the other fun activities at Emmett O'Neill, their website, Instagram page. Check it out.